I just want to thank you all so much for attending today, and it's my great honor to be able to have Dave Howard, Senior Manager of ITSM from Ingram Micro, join us today. I think you're going to have some excellent takeaways from today's session. I've known Dave for quite a number of years. I mean, back, I guess, when you were the president of the LA chapter of the ITSMF, I think is when we met. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, somewhere back in those days. So I've known you for quite a while, and Dave's been a longtime member of the ITSM community, very active, tons of experience, both as a practitioner at places like Toyota, also working with Ingram Micro, and also an independent consultant for a number of years. So Dave, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Dave.
I wondered if you could just take an opportunity perhaps to give us a little more background on yourself and a little background on Ingram Micro, please.
Sure. Well, I've been in the IT arena for 20 plus years and have done several things with the ITSM. As you mentioned, I started the ITSM program at Toyota Financial Services and ran that for many years, and then worked as a consultant with Migration Technologies for several years. And there we talked about and consulted on how to implement ITSM programs, how to actually bring the services to companies for the IT service management, the actual service part of it. That was our focus. And then I've been with Ingram Micro now for 3 years. And so Ingram Micro, as it talks about there on the slide, it's a global organization. We have, as it says, $50 billion in net sales in 2022. And we are really a global organization. Talking with David earlier, I mentioned that sometimes organizations say they're global, but they're not global. They have locations throughout the world, but everything's focused in the U.S. Ingram Micro is a true global organization. I would say that we are working 24 hours a day in some part of the world, whether it is in the U.S., Asia, Europe, Australia, we're working. What Ingram Micro is really, the company is more of a logistics company. Even though we have kind of a technology name, we do deal with technology, and that when we talk about logistics, is we focus with we're wholesalers of technology, whether it's Apple, HP, those kind of companies, and we handle the logistics for those companies. And as we continue to move in, talking about reselling services also, such as cloud and those kind of things. So that's what the organization's all about.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. I'll just give you a little bit of background on Navvia. So for those of you who don't know, Navvia is the provider of a business process modeling and analysis tool. We actually started our company back in 2000 as a consultancy focused on implementing service management. And we developed the Navvia Process Designer as a productivity tool for our consultants. Today, we have quite a number of our clients using the tool as a part of their service management office and their IT service management program. And time permitting, I'll be able to give a little bit of a demonstration of the tool towards the end, but would really like to focus on the conversation on the Global ITSM program up front. So that's a little bit about Navvia, and we'll talk a little bit more at the end of today's webinar. So the webinar today is about a Global ITSM program. Service management itself is an approach that information technology organizations use to optimize the way they design, the way they build, the way they implement and operate the services they deliver to their customers. And there's a lot of different elements to an ITSM program. There's how you have your organization structured. And in this case, we're talking about a global ITSM program. how you have your processes, how you document, design them, how you implement and manage those processes. And of course, there's the technology and tools to support the mandate. When you look at ITSM, I mean, there's a lot of commonality between a local program or sort of a smaller program and a global one, because there's some commonality. But when you implement on a global scale, there's a lot of unique challenges. You're going to have geographical issues, cultural differences. How do you standardize your processes over different countries where there might be different business practices in place? Communication and collaboration can always be a challenge when you have a global organization. Standardizing technology. How do you deal with organizational change management, especially when the team is so distributed? And of course, you might even have issues with vendor management as you're dealing with so many different vendors across the globe. So a lot of different challenges in an ITSM program when you're running it on a global scale. Any comments on that, Dave? Does that sound?
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of components there that you mentioned, and there's a lot of pieces to make it successful. Implementation, acceptance, support, and those kind of things.
And I know, like, just for yourself, I mean, you're dealing with teams right around the globe. I mean, you were telling me your day starts sometimes as early as 6 a.m. Because you have to be available to work with teams, in a follow the sun basis.
Yeah. My day typically starts anywhere from 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then because of the global nature, I'm pretty much busy until about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning. Then I have a couple hours to get some of my own work done. And then I start again, probably talking with the global organization anywhere around 3 o'clock until probably 6, maybe sometimes even 7 p.m. So that's when people come back online. They go off and they come back on. Yeah.
That's great. So just a little bit of a little more housekeeping here in terms of how this is going to proceed. So we have a series of questions that Dave and I are going to use. We're going to go back and forth in the conversation. We'd appreciate it if folks could chime in with any comments that they might have or any questions that they might have. But just to also get a sense of the audience, we have a very simple poll question. So just you've signed up for this webinar. Just curious as what your interest is in the Global ITSM program. Do you currently have a program in place? Are you looking to implement a Global ITSM program, or there's no plans to implement and you're just curious about how this type of thing works? Are you able to launch the poll, Catherine? And do you see that under the poll tab? Yeah, there we go. So there's a tab on your, yes, I see some of you have found it. So there's a little tab on your, in the Wistia browser. You just need to go there, enter in your results. We won't take too long. Just trying to get a good sense of where everyone's at. So it's interesting. It's about a 15. Oh, okay. I think we'll call it there. It looks like we have about 57% of the attendees are just curious about the Global ITSM program. No real plans to implement. 37% currently have a Global ITSM program, and there looks to be like 7% of folks looking to whether they should or not implement a Global ITSM program. So that helps us. It sort of gives us a sense of the audience here today. So thank you for that. So moving into our first question, Dave, can you provide some background at the program? So for example, can you give us some insight? Have you always had a Global ITSM program at Ingram Micro?
Well, at Ingram Micro, the ITSM program here started around 10 years ago or so, maybe a little longer than that. But as in many times in organizations, there's always a a need that's developed, and they're looking for some type of organizational methodology that can help lead the organization into the important components of running an IT organization, and that's not necessarily an IT organization. Now it kind of bleeds over to the business in some cases. And so that's the way it got started. And it's now evolved into what we have today in regards to the fact that ITSM here is not a project that we're working on. It's ingrained. It's a life, the way we do things. It's a life cycle. It's a lifestyle, I should say. It's not whether or not we're going to have a program or not going to have change management and we look at things as it's the way we work. We have different types of governance in place that works. There's acceptance from executive management. And those are important things to make it work. But again, it's ingrained into the organization. It's not just it's not a project. It's what we do.
Was there any significant event or catalyst for implementing the global program?
No, I think it was just a matter of getting organized, and at a point where you get to the size of an organization, and you need those things to be really successful. Yes, smaller companies, in my experience, smaller companies can have ITSM programs, but the depth and width of the ITSM program does not necessarily need to be as wide it is in a global organization. One thing I did mention is that Ingram Micro has 30,000 employees.
Right.
Like I said, across the globe. So there's a need to add the governance and to make sure that processes are followed.
Now that's very important. And can you tell us a little bit about the team that you have in place? And one thing I noticed is, and I really think this is a great thing, you have both the ITSM team and the tool developers. I think you're using ServiceNow.
Yes.
You have both of those within your group.
Right. Yeah. So my responsibility is the ITSM team, which I have 15 people on the team. And then I also have the what we call IAMServe, but it's actually the ServiceNow development team also under my purview there. And we have 10 ServiceNow developers on those teams. And so that actually brings in some continuity between the two so that we can focus on things, because the developers, they're developers. They do ServiceNow. They understand how the tool works, but not necessarily how the processes work and why they're doing it. And one of the things that I've done since I've been here that was lacking was in our ServiceNow development area, we weren't eating our own dog food, as you said. You would say, as far as having a release process, having the right governance in place, and those kind of things. And that's one thing that we've implemented here, that we just adopted our own processes that weren't being adopted in there. So we did that. So I can talk more about the program a little later, but.
Sure. But in your team itself, do you have various roles? For example, do you have a business analyst, process designers,
Sure.
architects?
Yeah.
How's that structured?
Yeah. So my team does a lot of the functions within the operations of the organization, such as, of course, we have the basic things such as incident management, program, problem management, those kind of things. But we have some more advanced things, such as one is I have a team right now of 5 major incident managers. I have a CMDB team that has 3 people on it, and they're focused completely on the CMDB. We do software asset management. We do hardware asset management. We do certificate management. So we focus on a lot of those things. And rather than, we do have some process managers, a kind of a role in that area, but we also have a lot of generalists that work across all the functions, and they share the day-to-day operations functions, such as like approving changes. It's not just our change group that does that. All of the ITSM members, they rotate across. And so 1 hour, it could be somebody that is actually a change manager approving it. In another hour, it could be one of our problem people. The next hour, it could be one of our major incident managers. So we kind of share that responsibility. So everybody is familiar with all the processes that we have in place.
Now, one of the things when we spoke last week, just preparing for the webinar, we were talking about process owners, and something you said surprised me. You don't have process owners at Ingram Micro.
No, we don't. And that goes back to the fact of ownership, because we feel it should be, our ITSM people are all smart people. They all have kind of their SME type situations, so we don't have process managers. One of the things I always believe is that different people are suited for different jobs. You don't have somebody that's a good negotiator as a change person, you're a change manager. You have somebody that's black and white person who's a change manager, because you can't have a gray area person doing change management. It's got to be yes or no, because you're basically change management, as we all know, is recognizing risk and trying to avoid that risk.
Well, so we all saw the risk of the AT&T outage last week, right?
Right.
We had a question here from Mark, and I think what we were just talking about plays right into this. So Mark was asking, do you have a certain methodology to get executive support? And I think, one of the things you said, and you may not have process owners, but you have direct executives as part of the incident management teams, maybe, and the change teams. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, one of the things, and this is maybe when we talk more about governance, we can talk more about it, but our executive management has buy-in. It comes all the way from the CEO down to our directors and managers. They all are bought into the fact is, because I've been in organizations where you're fighting with not only just your developers and your people who are trying to implement stuff and don't want to do change management, to the VPs of saying, why are we doing this? We don't have that here. It's, like I said, it's the way of life. And in fact, I was in one of our meetings this morning that we can talk about later on some of the governance. And the VP was there today in that call, and he was running that meeting. We have the CIO that pops in and to one of our meetings every once in a while. So they believe it, they live it, and they demonstrate that they understand it.
And I think I know where Mark's question came from, because we've done our share of ITSM webinars, and it often comes up is like, what did you do to get sponsorship? We just can't seem to get sponsorship here in our organization. But you're saying at Ingram Micro, they're really focusing on how the program can improve quality and actually contributes to the bottom line, right?
Right. Definitely. And, and there's I look at ITSM as one, you put processes in place, and then you put governance in place, because, and governance includes reducing risk. And that, if you keep focused on those kind of things, you get the benefits. People I know don't like change management because you have to go through everything to understand risk and so forth. I mean, this is an easy one. They don't like software asset management and being held accountable for licenses they use, those kind of things. So it's important to understand what the real benefits are of that.
And to be able to articulate those benefits in a way that the senior management understands.
Right. Correct.
So what are, we were talking about some of the key elements of the program when we got together last week. And I think one of the things you really emphasized was that buy-in and senior level involvement.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been in a number of places, and especially as a consultant, you've seen many organizations. How would you rate the buy-in at Ingram Micro compared to some of the places you've been?
Well, and it goes back to, like I said, this is, it's not even a question here. Again, so example, in our meeting this morning, I mentioned that our VP was in, and after we finished our meeting, his first questions, or not question, discussions start coming up about is, what are we going to do to help reduce some of our MTTR? And I was able to say is, look, we already have a program in place that we're putting in place to help reduce focus on some of that. And additionally, I think the other part of the buy-in and buy-in acceptance is it's in the goals of the managers in the organization for your yearly performance objectives. It's really in there important, as far as not necessarily that you will use service management, but it's based on that and with those objectives.
I recall, and I think we mentioned it in the introduction, that you worked for Toyota. And, Toyota's have always been very well known for their Toyota production system and their emphasis on quality. Mm-hmm. You feel there's a similar kind of feel at Ingram Micro, that emphasis on quality?
Yeah, there definitely is. Actually, I had brought in some of the Toyota, waste Muda type thing, and some of those concepts here also, because one of the things that the ITSM team here is they get focused on the day-to-day activities and not always look at continuous improvement. As everybody knows, that's part of the ITSM tenets is continuous improvement. And so, bringing in and looking at not only what we're doing today, but how can we make it better? And we try to put an atmosphere in here is that what can we always do to be better? And so we always focus on that.
That's really important. And, that focus on being better, also that focus on revenue, efficiency, and governance, that I really, all those things need to be there to get the executive sponsorship, and they need to be there. It works very closely with the executives to ensure that those elements are in place. So can you, I know there's definitely some challenges when it comes to implementing a global ITSM program. Can you share some of those challenges that you might be facing?
Yeah, it goes all the way from just the old simplistic one is, why do I need to do this? And, that's always understanding why do I need to do it and those kind of things. But then we sometimes, and I know one of the questions that we have later on is talking about growth with M&As, major, mergers and acquisitions. One of our things that we use as a way to increase our business and revenue is through M&As. And that's one of the things we have to do is when we acquire a company, we have to bring our ITSM processes in that. And we do have a playbook, if you will, because we do it a lot. So we know that if we're going to acquire a company, this is what we have to do. We have a playbook that not only does it say, okay, now we got to bring the data centers online to our data centers, those kind of things. But one of the things we do from a service management perspective, we have training. We have a couple of things. We have some online training, and I can expound on that. But also we go in and we have standard training material that so members of the ITSM team usually train new companies.
There was a question just came up. How does your team interact with enterprise architecture? Is there a linkage between the ITSM program and enterprise architecture?
Yes, there is. That's actually one of the things we are working on now is streamlining that process. I sit on what we call the the governance board, the architectural governance board on that also.
Mhm.
So, and the reason I do is I'm a participant in that so that we understand from the ITSM perspective what type of new architecture is coming on. Can we support it? Do we support it today? And how do we have to bring it in? Because, and you talked about how people either comply or they don't comply. You know, one of the things that we catch a lot is people trying to put things in without going through the right processes, and we catch that through the governance boards.
Very good. Any other challenges? How about cultural? Has that been an issue?
Not really. I mean, you know, ever since I have been here, I would say it's not really a cultural issue too much, because we have been doing it so long and there's been such a buy-in here. So we don't really have a cultural issue here. But I know that in previous organization, the whole culture of doing service management is a change in focus. And it's really the focus of looking at what service you're trying to deliver and support, and look at it from a service perspective, and not just, well, I'm just going to do my job. You need to understand how it all ties together and how it provides services to the business.
Now, we were also talking, and I found this really interesting. You actually have a 24/7 change management cab or board in place?
Yeah, we do. So we do things a little different than, say, like an organization. If you were looking at the ITIL books, and it tells you to do change management, it tells you to have the proper review and have CAB meetings and those kind of things. So what we do here is we don't have a CAB meeting, and per se. What we do, though, is we do have 24/7 change approvals, and of course we have categorizations, whether it's a critical or a high or a standard change, those kind of things. We have just like that kind of stuff.
You've got your change models defined.
We do. We have change models defined, and so because we have that 24/7 approval process in place, we're able to, one, recognize those issues, and then from a CAB perspective, what we do is every 2 times a week, we have what we call a significant incident review meeting, which is a meeting we have, and we can go more into that later. But this is a meeting. At those meetings, the other thing, besides looking at problems and incidences and so forth, we actually review changes. So any high and any significant change is reviewed during that meeting. So
it's like a PIR, basically.
Pardon me?
Like a post implementation review?
No. Actually, they're before they're implemented. So we look at those. We look at the changes, and one of the things we do is we review. When we say review, we look at them and we say, okay, here's the list of all the changes that we're going to do, high and significant changes that we're doing in the next couple of days or over the weekend. And then we say, okay, any questions on the high changes? No. And then we give the people opportunities to present their changes. And so we have a culture that people speak up and they say, okay, I have 2 changes I'm doing tomorrow, and this is the effect it's going to have. But we do have a requirement that if it's a significant change, they do need to present what's happening there. And it's very to the point. And that's one thing we focus on here is, when you get into situations, when you start talking about incidences, changes, and all that stuff, people go on for hours sometimes talking about it. We say, you've got 5 minutes to present it. That's it. No more.
Cool. Anything else in terms of challenges that you can think of?
No. Yeah, and just to add on, people may say, well, how successful you are in changes. We have about a 98% success rate in our changes.
That's amazing. I think you were also telling me, and this really speaks to the quality that you're trying to drive through this program, about the CMDB accuracy.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that we had a large initiative on this last year in 2023, was that it was felt that we didn't have an accurate CMDB. In reality, we were actually at about a 75-80% accuracy in CMDB. So through activities that we did this year, we're right around 90% accurate right now, and we're continuing to work on that.
That's very impressive. We talked about some challenges. So I understand that you insourced your service desk. So you had a distributed service desk, sorry, an outsourced service desk at one point. Yeah, and that you insourced it. Can you talk a little bit about that? Some insight into why you took that approach?
Yeah, so we had a service desk that was outsourced, and like a lot of companies, it was based in India. And one of the things that we saw, and I don't want to say they didn't do a good job, because they did do a good job. Mm-hmm. However, because not being part of the organization, there was a lot of things they weren't good at. And that was one, knowing the environment, and having a relationship with the people here. Plus, it was costing us a lot of money to do it.
How about sense of ownership? Do they have a sense? Did they have the same sense of ownership?
Well, Well, the agents didn't, because they didn't have a sense of ownership. The managers did, because we made them have that ownership. But that sense of ownership was also not there. So what we did this past year, and actually just went into production in December and January, is we brought it in house. So we now have. We have 3 services desks. We have one in Romania and Sofia. We have one in Manila, and one in Pune in India. And so we do a 24/7 service desk. And the focus is on first call resolution, making sure that people get their responses quickly. We have we put in a process for feedback process on how their incident, how their experience was. In addition to that, we also have put in a chat bot in there that uses chat GBT and those kind of things. So that answers a lot of questions. And from our perspective, and a lot of organizations, I'm sure, that are similar to ours, in today's world, the percent of calls that are actually incidences and calls to the service desk through the telephone is very small. Ours is only about 7%. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of other entry points in there. From we have chat, we have, like I said, the chat bot, email, and of course phone. So we have those different modalities that how people can get in contact with the service desk. And of course, part of that also is to have metrics in place that can measure all this to make sure how you're doing.
So I would imagine there's been some benefits you've seen by bringing this service desk in-house. What could you talk to some of those benefits?
Yeah. So far, what we've seen, and it's still early, we have seen benefits in regards to how fast and how better we can resolve things. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we've done is our service desk also is part of our major incident process. They are the first line of defense on that. So when somebody has a significant incident going on, they contact our service desk. Service desk then does an assessment of actually what the urgency and impact of that incident is, and then engages our major incident managers on that and for handling. So that's one benefit, and we're seeing more and more efficiencies as we go along, and better customer service scores.
What about retaining corporate knowledge, organizational knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, these people, of course, are now part of Ingram, so they're going to have a better knowledge of that. And one of the things we did do, we did a I would say high level overview of the organization. We have, as you can imagine, in an organization this size, we have a lot of applications. Mm-hmm. So knowing that is tough in itself, but understanding how the organization works is also important.
So we touched upon this briefly earlier in the conversation. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can just expand on it a little bit. So Ingram Micro is growing through acquisition, and how does this affect the ITSM program?
Yeah, I was just looking at one of the questions here, but yeah. So in regards to how we do the acquisitions and so forth, and it's interesting. And you earlier talked about what kind of pushback we get, and we get pushback from the M&As when they come in, because you can imagine, here they are, they've been running along with their own processes, and now we're saying, guess what? You can't just go and change a server. You just can't change those things, and you just can't put them in. You can't just, we have a process for that. And so we have right now we have over 280 different, if you're familiar with ServiceNow, they're called service catalogs, or otherwise request forms. Mm-hmm. And so having that in place, if you need something, we have a form for it. You fill it out and it goes through the process. And so getting these smaller organizations to understand that we have a NOC that is monitoring 24/7. Why do they need to be? Why does Ingram need to be looking at my servers? Well, because we're monitoring them. We have global network organization that can provide additional support that perhaps a smaller company couldn't provide. Those kind of things.
We just had a question come in from, I think it's Janice. I know we touched upon some of this at the beginning of the presentation, but maybe just to reiterate, size of the environment in terms of how large is the IT organization that you support?
Right now, we actually just had a little, we just recently at the beginning of the year we had two IT organizations, if you will. We had a IT organization where we had a traditional CIO in charge of, and then we also have a digital organization, and so we have a chief digital officer too. So at the beginning of the year, those organizations were joined together. So now we have one IT organization. Mm-hmm. From a digital perspective and just the normal IT organization. So approximately, we have right now about 2,300 people working in IT in those areas.
And how many different sites do you cover?
Great question. Good question. I don't remember. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head to be accurate.
Yeah, and Janice, this is totally global, though. You have sites right around the globe that you deal with.
Yeah. I mean, we're in 128 different countries, mm-hmm. and so when I say I don't know how many sites we have, because we have some places that have an office that has 10 people in it, and we have to support that. Where we also have warehouses across the globe we also support.
Yeah, and just to put some context and perhaps just $50 billion in sales. You serve 90% of the global population, 61 countries that you operate in, 27,000 associates, 6 continents, shipping 1.5 billion units a year.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys keep it busy.
Yeah.
And you've done 40 acquisitions worth over $2 billion since 2020.
Yeah, that's
right. And that's why talking about this acquisition piece, when you're bringing 40 different companies into the fold, you've got some of those are working. They're probably used to working much faster. Maybe they're smaller organizations. Right. Some of them might be plodding along because they didn't have good process. So integrating them into your global ITSM program is really key, right?
Yeah, and also one of the things you just brought up was working in different countries is very significant. I can think of one acquisition that we did in Europe, and one of the things we will go in and talk to them about is saying, okay, we're going to bring you into the global network organization. And one of the things they brought up was that, because of being in Europe, there are certain privacy requirements that the data cannot leave the country. So that's a problem, or not a problem, but a challenge we had to overcome.
Sure.
Was understanding that the data could not leave the country. And so those are kind of the things that we face a lot when we start looking at these mergers and acquisitions.
So we're kind of moving into one of my favorite questions. So I've just finished writing a blog post on governance. So how do you deal with ITSM governance in a global program?
Well, one of the things is you have to be, the basic thing is you have to be able to identify what the organizational structure looks like, and how you're going to report that. We report out, we use, we call them towers, and we always have VPs and directors that are in charge of those various areas. So when we start doing reporting, we report out on those things. So we have several things that we do from a governance perspective. We have of course, we have performance dashboards that go all the way from showing how many incidents you have, what's your time to resolve, to actually looking at how you're complying with certain programs. So we have dashboards, all of that. And one of the things we just did is we just changed from a provider to ServiceNow in our dashboards. So that's actually improved that area. The other thing we have from a governance perspective is we have daily stand-up meetings. And so every weekday, I should say, we don't have them on weekends, but at 7:30 our time, we have we call it it's our major incident meeting. And what happens is any major incident or any incident really of significant ramifications is reviewed in that meeting every morning, and we go through that. And the expectation is that directors and managers are on that call. And so we discuss, so sometimes those meetings are 5 minutes, sometimes they're an hour. We don't know. Then in addition to that, we have 2 times a week meeting. I kind of referenced this before. We call it the SIR meeting, which stands for Significant Incident Review Meeting. And so that meeting is where they come, and I saw a question about problem management. This is when an incident is closed, it moves into problem management. And during this meeting, what happens is you come to this meeting, and whoever owns that, we call it a PBI because that's basically what ServiceNow calls their problems. So we have PIs, whoever owns that has to present to the meeting, and the meeting is run by an executive sponsor who's a director or a VP.
And I think that's that really goes back to this whole point about you have executive sponsorship throughout the entire program.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And so they have to talk about, what happened, why it happened, what was the business impact, what was the root cause, and then what are the preventative actions that you're going to do. And sometimes, sometimes those presentations go good and they get done. And other times the executive sponsor will say, you know what, I need more information. So they have to come back. Then after, what happens with that is that our ITSM team then follows up on those preventative actions, because there are dates assigned to those. And then my ITSM team follows up on those to make sure that those preventative actions are completed. And we have a really, like we talked about earlier, how we have a release board meeting that we do with different teams, talking about releases that are going to happen. And we have for our software asset management, for example, we have a quarterly review of our software asset information. How many applications do we have? How many licenses do we have? What's our position on those licenses, and those kind of things. Let's see, we've got all kinds of other stuff, but those are kind of the basic governance that we have in place.
And what about the continuous service
improvement reports? Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
What about the continuous service improvement aspect? So does that tie into the governance program?
It does, because one of the things that I'm really trying to focus on too is using all this data to say, what do we need to improve on? One of the things that I put in place was what we do is we two reports. One, we have a quarterly review of what's going on, and the other one is now we're doing a monthly major incident report also. And one of the things that I've charged our ITSM team is to say, it's okay to regurgitate numbers and talk about what happened and how it happened and so forth. But we need to analyze what happened and why it happened and what we can do to prevent it. And so that's now basically for every measurement, we have a graph, and then next to it, we have a text box, if you will, that says, this is our observation and this is what we can do to improve.
So what you're saying is your governance program is a true governance program. It's not about regurgitating numbers. Right. It's about actually identifying risk and mitigating that risk.
Yeah. I have something that I always try to bring in, and when I look at reports and everything that governance reports and everything else, my question is to measure the importance of that. Is to say, one, who's looking at it, and secondly, what is it telling us? I mean, what is the importance of it? What are you trying to say? If it doesn't, if you can't answer those questions, why are you doing it? Why are you wasting the time?
Exactly. Janice was asking, does your ITSM area get audited by internal audit?
Yes, it does. It does. And not only just internal audit, but also from a SOX perspective, we're heavily involved with compliance because of the importance and the involvement we have as an organization. We're doing all kinds of things. In fact, I was just actually fixing a ServiceNow workflow prior to this meeting. I was just finishing that up because we had a SOX finding that we had to address, and we just finished that up. So yes, we do get audited and have compliance.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's like we talked about earlier with all the different countries you operate in. There's privacy issues, GDPR, right, and all of that as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Kevin is asking, did you have? And you did mention earlier that you moved off of an old tool into ServiceNow dashboards, but is part of your ServiceNow or the ITSM team dedicated to performance analytics in ServiceNow?
Yes, actually, yes. That's one thing that we did this last year was we took one of our senior ITSM analyst and moved him into not only just helping run the CMDB, and that's one of his primary responsibilities, but also creating the metrics. And one of the things that, and I hate to say things that I did when I came in, but this other gentleman and I came in about the same time, and we started looking at the metrics that we were reporting. And we found several that we're not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly is we're asking why. Why are we doing this? Why are we reporting? Back like I said before, why are we reporting what is actionable?
Really good. Hey, and having known you for a long time, I mean, I know you're a real big believer in that balance, right? The balance between governance and actually getting stuff done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's an important component. And it happens every day. Somebody will say, why are we doing this? And then, sometimes I have an answer off the top of my head. Other times I say, you know what? I don't know. Let me look and see. And I'm not opposed to stopping something if it doesn't make sense.
No,
Because we're all busy. We need to focus on the important things.
So just to end on a real positive note, what are some of the, if you had to articulate some of the key benefits that you've seen by having a global program? And again, you've been around the block, you've worked at other agencies, you've worked as a consultant. What are some of the benefits you're seeing from this global approach as opposed to, let's say, having it all distributed?
Well, it's distributed in regards to, when you say distributed, you
Well,
mean
it's not siloed, I guess, is what I really mean to say. Yeah.
I always want to be open, and one of the things I've always prescribed to when doing programs and so forth is getting people involved. People always say, well, how do you get buy-in? Well, and from a distractor. And one of the things is take that distractor and put them on your team. Now they have buy-in. And but also the benefits I look at is cost reduction and understanding. When you do cost reduction, you have to understand what processes, what activities are providing you the most value. And don't just cut a program or make changes in a program that's making you money. How can you make that program better? So that's one way to look at it. Efficiencies and just governance. Overview, and I keep coming back to governance, but it's important because looking at how you're doing things to make sure your things are doing right in the most efficient manner.
Excellent. This has been a great conversation. We had some good questions from the audience. We'll be happy to take, as we're wrapping up here, we'd be happy to take any additional questions anybody might have. We do want to be respectful of people's time as we book this for an hour. But in way of wrapping up, I just want to say thank you so much, Dave, for being part of this. You definitely brought a lot of great insights into running a global ITSM program. And hopefully the team, not the team, but the audience here has gotten some great takeaways from this discussion. So I want to thank you very much for being part of the discussion today.
Sure.
And I'll keep an eye open here for any additional questions. One of the things I did mention at the onset of the presentation is that the Navvia Process Designer is being used by many organizations in their global ITSM programs or even a more local ITSM program. It's a great way to assess process maturity, design, document, and share processes, and to help enforce governance of your service management program. Just quickly, I can show you, and of course, my session expired while we were logged in here, but I can log back in real quick. Like I mentioned, a very powerful tool for the service management office by allowing organizations to basically survey their processes through built-in process maturity questionnaires based on models such as the capability maturity model or ISO's 33020 model, where you can distribute questionnaires to a large number of people and actually through dashboards and reports get a good sense of the overall maturity of your processes. A really powerful design tool that does more than just allow you to design your processes, but it allows you to capture things like user stories and technical requirements for process automation. So if you're going to build out a change management process, we have a full library of service management templates built into the tool that allow you to see your processes, from the template, modify these processes as you see fit, drill into a lot of detail about your processes. You can see here I have a nice 5-activity change management process, but more importantly, produce a whole wealth of information just at a click of a button. So if I want an executive summary for the change process, I can dynamically produce and build an executive summary of the process with a full table of contents, RACI charts, all the way down to having the flow diagrams and information. I could also pull out SIPOC diagrams for my process, full process wide RACI charts, or a whole host of different reports. And better yet, if I go in and change any of the information in the process, all your documentation is updated. We also have some capabilities within the tool to do governance and verification of your processes by assigning controls to people and collecting evidence of compliance. So just a super high overview of what Navvia is. If anyone's interested, we would be happy to schedule a demonstration of the product, and you can easily do that by responding to the email that Catherine will be sending out later today or tomorrow with the recording. So if you're interested in a demo where you'll learn about how our tool can do process design and sharing, user stories and requirement gathering, assessment and governance, and the whole host of IT service management, COBIT, and APQC business process templates built right into the tool. One of the best values you can have for implementing a service management program or a service management office. If you want to see a demo of the tool, again, you can just contact us by responding to the email that Catherine will be sending out, or schedule a demo by going to navvia.com/contact, and we'd be happy to do that for you. So we're right on time here at 3 o'clock. I just want to really thank everyone for being a part of today's presentation. I think a couple of other questions came in. So Dave, could you stick around for a minute or so?
Sure.
Okay, so we had a question from Miles. Miles, comes back to the age-old question: how did you manage to get executive buy-in?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And again, like I said, I was fortunate when I came here; I didn't have to worry about that because I already had it. But previously, I look at executive management as it's a must, as you mentioned. You have to have it, and I like to think about how you can do that. And one is it's not only executive management, but the people around you that do the job need to understand why you're doing it, and the executives need to hear why you want to do it. If they hear it from other people besides yourself, that helps to get the buy-in. And the other way I felt, one of the ways, because I did implement this at Toyota, and one of the things I got done there was starting to get the little wins. When they start to see the little wins, they start to believe you that you can do it. And I can say that the way it happened to me was I started that the way at Toyota, and then it got to the point where I almost kind of, if you know that Raiders of the Lost Ark movie where they actually have that ball coming behind Indiana Jones, that's what it felt like for me. I started out where they go, yeah, we're going to do this. Then all of a sudden it was like, I got some wins, and then all of a sudden it felt like I had this ball rolling behind me from the CIO saying, okay, now what are we going to implement? And, I think just trying to demonstrate what you can do is big.
Another question came in from Janice. She was asking if you're using knowledge management. I assume she means the knowledge management module of ServiceNow. And is this supporting the chat tool?
Yes, we do. Our knowledge management knowledge base in ServiceNow has, I think, 400 articles in it. And it is part of our process, is that when you do something, you create a knowledge article. And yes, our chatbot does reference those knowledge articles. That's great.
All right, I think that's the last of the questions. So once again, Dave, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Hopefully we'll get to see each other face to face in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
And thank you for being part of today's session.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, and thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful remainder of your day. And once again, you'll be getting an email with a recording. Feel free to respond if you're interested in learning more about the company, or if you have any questions for Dave, I'm sure you could send those in, and I'll forward them off to Dave, and we can get you connected.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.